Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan Chavez. I'm a venture associate with Capital Factory, and I'm so excited to be moderating the Intro to Gaming and AMA today with Justin Siegel. Uh, just so everyone knows, again, as a venture associate at Capital Factory, I focus and spend most of my time sourcing potential startups for Capital Factory's accelerator and investment fund, with a focus specifically on the North Texas market. With that being said, I'd love to bring on our CEO, Josh Bears, who can speak a little bit more about Capital Factory.
Howdy, my name is Joshua Bear, and I'm the founder and CEO of Capital Factory. Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas, the number one state for startups in the US. Thousands of entrepreneurs, programmers, and designers gather day and night, in person and online, for meetups, classes, and co-working. With boots on the ground in Austin, Dallas, and Houston, we meet the best entrepreneurs in Texas and introduce them to their first investors, employees, mentors, and customers. Capital Factory has invested in more than 300 Texas startups over the past decade. Whether physically in person or virtually online, Capital Factory is buzzing with energy and activity every day. Start with all the geekiest events on meetup.com and sprinkle in out-of-town guests, book signings, hackathons, innovation conferences, and pitch events. We're talking about thousands of participants every month. Most of the events are free, open to the public, and streamed over the internet. Capital Factory is all about community. Everyone's here to meet other people who can help them on their journey or to help others find their way. We kick off every morning with a text-based Ask Me Anything session with a mentor or investor in our Slack channel. Anyone in our community can ask questions in real time, and everyone else can see the answers. These are some of the most active investors and the most successful entrepreneurs in Texas. Those same mentors and investors do regular office hours where they volunteer a few hours a month. It's easy for any of our community members to find people with specific interests or expertise and to book a 30-minute meeting with them. With hundreds of mentors and investors in the network, there are dozens of meetings happening every day. Our co-working space provides desks, offices, conference rooms, classrooms, a podcast room, a video conferencing booths, and more. But the most important spot is the kitchen, because that's where everybody comes together. That's the real reason everyone's here, to meet each other. And every day at Capital Factory is demo day. Maybe it's the local angel investor network or a venture capitalist from out of town. Maybe it's one of the Fortune 500 scouts looking for new tech or a state or federal government official. It's delegations from other countries, school kids, army generals, and celebrities. We've helped entrepreneurs get in front of Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and even President Obama. How do we know who to put in front of the president? Well, first, they go through an intensive interview and assessment process where they're vetted by our staff and our mentor network. We categorize them by industry and technology and score them based on traction and potential. Then they have to work their way up to the top. On the way, they'll often meet with members of our Innovation Council of Fortune 500 scouts looking for startups with technology that can give the big companies a competitive advantage. They're hanging out in the kitchen of the co-working space and in our Slack channels online. They partner with startups to go after big government contracts with the Army Futures Command, Air Force Ventures, and the Texas Military Department. The money is flowing. In the past year, 30 startups in our community received more than $60 million in non-dilutive funding through government programs. Capital Factory is also the official Google Tech Hub for Texas. Google plugs us into a global network of other entrepreneurial communities and creates unique opportunities to help our startups attract investors, increase diversities, and access Google services. All of this activity creates exclusive deal flow and data for our investment fund. Our goal is to invest in the best deals in Texas, no matter who leads them. Over the past 10 years, we've secured $110 million in pro rata, super pro rata, and follow-on rights in more than 600 companies. We watch them all interact with our mentors, investors, Innovation Council, and each other, so we know which ones to invest in. Some of our most successful companies include Aceable, Coder, Data.World, Icon, Sensei, Storable, and WP Engine. Are you ready to quit your job and become an entrepreneur? Do you know someone who is? That's who I want to meet. And those are the kind of people who I can introduce you to. You can message me directly on Twitter at Joshua Bear or email me at josh@quityourjob.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Now, before we get started, we'd also like to thank our partners at CACI for everything that they do to support the startup community. For those of you who don't know, CACI is an American multinational professional services and IT company headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, but with also an office at Capital Factory. CACI provides services to many branches of the U.S. federal government, including defense, homeland security, intelligence, and healthcare. Here's a quick video from CACI. Awesome. And additionally, we'll have some messaging from CACI dropping in the comments, so be on the lookout for that. All right. So today we are very fortunate in having Justin Siegel as our guest for this intro to gaming and AMA. So for those of you who don't know, Justin Siegel is the co-founder and CEO of not one, but two successful mobile entertainment companies. The first, JSmart Technologies, was a pioneer in mobile games and was acquired by the SK Group in 2004. Within about a year or so of that exit, he went ahead and started his second company, JNJ Mobile, which eventually was backed by General Catalyst Partners and Softbank Capital, and built one of the first mobile-first social networks. Today, it's one of Android's top grossing social applications and a leading mobile platform for Android's for HTML5 based games. Justin's also the founder and managing partner of ATX Angel, which invests in early stage companies. He's also a Techstars mentor and advisor to Boston Seed Capital, along with being a mentor here at Capital Factory. Fun fact, he also used to teach French, I believe at the high school level. We'll confirm with that here shortly. So with that being said, let's bring Justin to the stage.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I was a middle school teacher, but
hey, Justin, I think you might be on mute.
Am I? Am I on mute?
Interesting.
Nope, I'm good. Okay. I think Jonathan can't hear me. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Technical issues here. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, sorry for the technical mishap there. But Justin, we're so glad to have you here today. I think a great place to start is by hearing the story of how you got into the world of gaming. What's JSmart Tech's origin story?
Yeah, so JSmart's story is I was working at an Israeli startup with my best friend during the dot-com boom. And like a lot of companies during that era, the boom went bust along with the company we were working with. And as it was imploding, one of our investors was America Online, AOL. They started talking about the potential for mobile. And this was back in 2001, so really early days on mobile phones. I started to talk to carriers around the world about gaming and what their plans were for gaming. And it was super early days, so there weren't any hard and fast plans, but there was a lot of interest in the potential anecdotally. And so as that company imploded, my partner Jamie and I started to think about the opportunity and look into it a little bit more, realized that if we could put together a nice catalog of games, I felt pretty confident that we'd be able to move them and get distribution. And so we started down that path. And back in 2001, yeah, we were one of the first developers and publishers of games for cell phones in North America. And we start, the US, back then the US market was pretty far behind, particularly Asia, but many markets. And so we started selling games into a whole bunch of different countries. One's like Canada, but also the Ukraine, Sri Lanka, Australia. So we actually had to work our way from the outside back into the US because the US market was, like I said, behind the other markets around the globe for a number of different reasons, which we don't need to kind of probably drill down on here.
Interesting. So that almost implies an element of universality to playing games, regardless of where you might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we sort of recognize that beyond just kind of speaking and texting, that people have their phones with them everywhere. And even this is sort of an interesting fact, right? Even in 2001, 2002, globally, more people were accessing the internet through their cell phones, flip phones, basic flip phones, than through kind of PCs, right? So it sort of gives you a window into the global, sort of a global perspective, right? Because in the West, we have this assumption that everyone has access to a desk, a computer, internet, today broadband, or high-speed internet connections, and that was certainly the case or the perspective even 20 years ago, back in 2001. But the reality is very different, right? Mobile is an incredible equalizer in terms of providing the opportunity for many people in second and third world countries to have access to internet, even if it's basic access, both in terms of speeds and screen sizes and all of that. That really has revolutionized, the West, obviously, but more importantly, probably the second and third world countries. And so, so in 2001, when we talked to people about building games for cell phones here in the West, they kind of thought about Snake. They didn't really see it as a particularly interesting or compelling opportunity. And a lot of that was because the phones were very simple and most people had access to PlayStation, Xbox, their computer, so they didn't see the cell phone as a gaming platform. But again, if you looked at even, like I said, in 2001, according to Nokia, more people in the world were connecting to the internet in a rudimentary way through cell phones. So if you looked at second and third world countries, that phone could be a gaming platform that didn't have competition, right? Because if you're in one of those countries, you probably don't have internet connection in terms of broadband or high speed. You don't have an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Game Boy. It was your phone. And so we looked at that opportunity on a global level and pursued it, and it turned out to be a worthwhile pursuit.
Absolutely, I'd say. Yeah. So, JSmart was acquired, I believe, in 2004, and
yeah, that's right.
2005, you were already in the process of starting JNJ Mobile, your second venture.
Correct.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about what inspired that particular company. And, maybe you can share some insights you learned from building JSmart that helped you with J&J.
Yeah, so with JSmart, we were building, especially at the outset, very simple games. When we got acquired by the SK Group, which is a South Korean conglomerate, again, they were a more advanced market than the US in terms of technology back then, and also culturally. And what we started to do is started to look at multiplayer games a little bit, which started to be more of an opportunity. What we found is that when we introduced really chat and the ability to message other gamers within these super simple games, a lot of the activity moved from the game into the communication with other people, which makes sense, right? Because ultimately cell phones are communication tools first and foremost. So we started to see that, and also see what was happening in Asia, where there were social communities being built around games, on cell phone games in Japan, in South Korea, particularly. So with that, we wanted to move in that direction in the US market. We saw some traction. Then we also saw what was happening on the web, right? That was the same year that you had Facebook, MySpace, Bebo, Friendster. They were completely focused on the web, not on mobile. but they started to build out this idea, this concept of a social network, connecting people. And we saw what we were doing. We frankly were unable initially to convince the SK group that this was the right direction to go. And so after a while of being frustrated, we said, well, if they're not going to go there, we're going to go there ourselves. And so we left, which was, kind of an aggressive move because we had they had bought us. We had very cushy jobs, and they treated us great, so no complaints. But ultimately, we just saw that there was such a big opportunity in this space that we decided we couldn't sort of sit on our hands and let it pass us by. So we left and launched JNJ Mobile, which had a couple of products. MocoSpace is by far the biggest and best known that emerged. But we had done a number of different products, sort of iterating around this idea. But MocoSpace was the one that really exploded. And it didn't explode overnight, right? I mean, it was not an overnight success. It took us about a half year to find traction for that product. Over that half year, we questioned our sanity of why we left these really great jobs to pursue something that didn't look like it was working at first. And that was super stressful. But ultimately, we stuck with it. We were able to turn a corner. There's some interesting stories we can get into around that, but yeah. So that's kind of how we made it from JSmart to MocoSpace.
Awesome. So while we're still on the subject of JNJ Mobile, I think this question might be, or the answer rather, might be relevant to a lot of our viewers out there. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you positioned the company when you were seeking investment. From my understanding, General Catalyst and Smart Softbank Capital invested in the company.
Yeah. So my answer is going to be terrible for people, right? Maybe. We were incredibly fortunate. We did not raise any money. So with JSmart, our first company, we tried to convince investors to give us money. We completely failed. Because we failed the first time around, and we're still able to build a successful business, we had assumed and decided that with MocoSpace or JNJ Mobile, the parent of MocoSpace, that we were not going to raise money. So we decided we're not going to raise money at all. We're going to bootstrap this thing. And so what happened was, which is like why I say this is terrible answers, it's not really that common, is that investors started to come into us, right? It's an amazing thing when it happens. It's not something that it's not a fundraising strategy other than to say, if you stay focused on trying to build a great product and a great opportunity, in a great market and an opportunity, and you stick with it, eventually you will get noticed, right? And so there's definitely, we can get into that a little bit as a fundraising strategy. Like I said, in some ways it's a terrible answer because you can't expect some of the top venture capital firms in the world to happen to come knocking on your door. We were just, very fortunate that happened, that played out that way. And in fact, it's even more than that. We actually sort of rejected them at first because we didn't think that it was for real. So I guess it probably made us even more attractive and more desirable in that way. But in terms of what maybe the takeaway is for the audience is that I find a lot of startups, a lot of early stage startups, and this is true across the board, not just Capital Factory. A lot of them rush too early to raise money, right? They want to raise money. They sort of have very unrealistic expectations about that process, and they rush into it without really having demonstrated that they are investable, right? That they've put together the right team, that they've sort of clarified what exactly it is, the problem that they're working on, what the solution is, and then that they've built a product and demonstrated at least some traction, some early signs of product market fit, which is common but sometimes overused term. And so I would say that while maybe you'll be fortunate and you can sort of be building something in a killer market that gets noticed by firms, but at a minimum, I think people need to be much more patient about, trying to raise money and rushing into that process.
Understandable. And before we continue, I want to let the audience know that we will be having a Q&A session towards the end of today. So please feel free to drop away questions in the comments. So, kind of bringing it forward to now, Justin,
Yep.
current macro environment has been an absolute boon for the gaming industry. With some estimates, and I'm referring to Newzoo's report, I believe came out in June, projecting the market size in 2020 somewhere north of 160 billion, possibly more. So between the surge of usage and hours played, increase in unit sales, the introduction of next-gen and console gaming, which happened more recently, obviously, two major in-game concerts with Travis Scott and arguably Lil Nas X in Roblox. Politicians streaming Among Us on Twitch is almost too much to keep track of. So my question to you is, of the current environment, what do you think are the aspects that are here to stay versus it being as a result of COVID-19 and the impact it's had on the industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, this, probably a lot of the audience knows this, right? But in general, and sort of feels this, in general, gaming for a long time, even to today, where I get questions from people that are not gamers, is perceived as this niche. And sort of this subculture that, it's just teenage boys that play games. The reality, as we all know, is far from that, right? Gaming is a bigger industry than Hollywood and has been for probably 10 years, right? And so people always sort of scratch their heads. But if you look at a movie like Star Wars, which is about as big as it gets, right? Their opening weekend globally could be a few $100 million for the Star Wars franchise. And that's amazing for a movie. Most movies, it's, a much smaller number than that. When Call of Duty comes out, Call of Duty will sell over $1 billion in the first 24 to 48 hours, right? And then games like League of Legends that generate billions of dollars a year, even though they're free. So people outside the space need to realize just how big gaming is and is still growing. In terms of your specific question, look, I think COVID has accelerated the path that we were on for many things, gaming included. And so I think most of what's happening is here to stay, right? And so gaming has become, an even more social experience for an even wider group of people. Like you said, politicians, chess is a hot, game category now, not video game chess, right? Actual analog, right? One of the most amazing things, which I love and totally really, speaks to a lot of my areas of interest and that I'm excited to see where it goes, is how gaming is connecting elderly people to technology and to younger people and creating community. So there's stories of 70, 80-year-old people that are generally sort of limited, and especially during COVID, extremely limited in terms of what they can do outside the home. But they're playing games on their Nintendo, like on Nintendos that have been given to them by their children or grandchildren, and being taught how to play, and then being set up on Twitch to stream. And all of a sudden, instead of being alone in their house or their condo or their assisted living facility, they're now connecting with friends and family, and also fans all over the world. And so it's just such a great connector on so many levels. And I could get on the soapbox and preach what gaming has always taken, has always gotten, I think, a negative bias in a lot of mainstream media. And I really think it's because it's totally misunderstood. And and people are now, to your point in COVID, starting to see beyond just hardcore gamers, the power of gaming to connect people, keep them connected and engaged in positive ways, and create community, generate, I think, really positive cognitive outcomes, mental health outcomes, all of those things. So you're not going to find someone who kind of will kind of speak about the power of gaming and the love that I have for it and what it does for people more than me. And I think it's here to stay, right? I think when COVID's over, and it will be over, right? I think people are social creatures. We want to be back together in person, and doing things together in person for sure. But I think more people have been exposed to the power of, online connection with gaming and social, being able to socialize through that. And I think that will stick. I think
Yeah,
that'll.
I totally agree with you, Justin. And obviously anecdotal, but for me, it's really interesting to see how many people throughout the last 6 or 7 months who, I've never seen pick up a controller in their entire lives, going
Yeah.
out and buying Nintendo Switch and getting Animal Crossing or playing a game that doesn't necessarily have the typical, go here and shoot this loop.
Right.
Yeah, so it absolutely is fascinating. So obviously you spend a lot of your time in the space.
Yeah.
Kind of a follow-up question to that. Has there been anything that's particularly surprised you in the last 8 or 9 months?
Well, I spoke to two of them, right? So one is, one is this idea that streaming is moving beyond sort of these traditional esports to things like chess, which is awesome, right? But people are realizing, like, yeah, if you're sort of entertaining, it doesn't matter what game you're playing. You don't have to be shooting things. You can be playing chess and teaching people how to play chess, and the community is super interested in that, right? So I think that's something that's a little bit surprising, and I think that what gets streamed and what sort of gets included in this gaming community is going to continue to get broader and broader and broader. And the other part, like I said, is the power of gaming to move beyond sort of the typical teenage boy idea that's all he's playing, right? That couldn't be further from the truth, right? If you look at the data, I think it's probably 30 to 40% of gamers are females, depending on the game. So you see all female teams starting to take shape in esports, which is awesome, right? You have, I think, I forget which org, but just rolled out their first pro Valorant, all-female Valorant team, which is great. And so I think you're seeing the demographic, right? You're seeing that tent expand, and near and dear to my heart, like I said, is I love, because my career, even though a lot of it's been gaming, to me, really the central kind of challenge or thing that I love to think about and focus on, whether it's in my like sort of entrepreneurial stuff around gaming, or even some of my personal stuff around sports and athletics and whatnot, is building community and dealing with this challenge of sort of loneliness. And so I love that gaming is now reaching into new demographics, particularly ones that are every demographic today is very vulnerable to loneliness, from every age, gender, ethnicity, you name it. I love the connecting power that gaming has. I love to see that older people are able to tap into that. I think it's just super powerful and magical, and I hope that it continues to connect people and make people feel like they're connected to friends, family, and whatnot. And there's just so many great stories about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually bought my mother a Nintendo Switch for her birthday a couple months ago, and got her Animal Crossing, and she's been absolutely hooked. I think actually some of her childhood friends had some similar kind of situation where like their kid or a family member bought that, and now they're reconnecting there. And then personally, I play Minecraft to reconnect or really keep in touch with my little brother back home. So totally understand that. So shifting gears a little bit, I think maybe in past years or decades, there's been an assumption from the perspective of investors that investing into games isn't really a VC backable, venture because of the one-hit wonder of games, which I think that is transforming quickly in light of live services and the shift to digital copies of games, et cetera. So my question to you, for investors that are interested in maybe dipping their toes into the space, what do you think are some important things to consider or understand?
Yeah, well, I mean, you touched on it. I think gaming is a super high beta, right? High risk investment. I mean, fundamentally, most early stage investing is gaming in particular, because the nature of gaming is that you're going to invest a lot of time, a lot of money over a certain period of time, depending on what platform, what type of title. But it could be anywhere from as short as several months to, in some cases, even in Austin, right, with was it Crowfall, right, years to build, and tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to build some of these titles. And you're not going to know the outcome for a long time, right? You can get feedback from community in bits and pieces, right? But until somebody sort of plays the finished product, until you sort of release it into the wild, you're really not going to know whether what you've been working on all this time is going to have the potential to generate a positive outcome. So you sort of have to be prepared for that. The other part, which goes hand in hand with that, is that gaming, unlike a lot of early stage or investing in other industries, is that gaming is really a mix of art and science, right? And so you can put together the most talented teams, right? People that have great track records, great experience, great skills, great vision. But there's still an art to it, and you put it together, and you hope you're building something that is beautiful and amazing and realizing your vision. And many times it does all of those things, but it doesn't connect commercially. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be prepared for the fact that you might be working on something that is amazing, but may or may not work for reasons that are in some ways sort of beyond your control. The other part, as an investor, and I see this because I interact with a fair number, is that when you get approached by teams, you sort of want to understand where they're coming from, right? Because there are teams that are just straight up artists, right? They have an artistic vision. They want to build the game that they want to play, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? The same way that a film director is making a movie that they want to see. But then you sort of have to ask yourself, are there a lot of people that want to play the game that these guys and gals want to play? Or is this going to be something that's really just sort of, a labor of love, but doesn't really have a market? Versus on the other end of the spectrum, there are some companies, right, that have totally dialed in what the business's opportunity is for the game. They're not necessarily passionate about the particular game or the artistry that goes into it, but they recognize that there are arbitrage opportunities, there's white spaces in the market. They're going after that. And so in that scenario, it could be very financially rewarding, but you may not actually sort of love the titles being built. And I think, so you sort of have to understand where you sit on that spectrum and where you're comfortable making the investments. I love both areas, and maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle, though honestly, I love artists that are just working on their art, because some amazing products can get built that way. And sometimes those are some of the best games that come out of it, but it's also high risk. The other one is sort of lower risk, but again, just maybe not as artistic, right? It's sort of like, do you want to invest in, Avengers 10, or do you want to invest in, I don't know, Call Me by Your Name, or some other indie movie?
I imagine in that second category, you see a lot of games that use approaches that some might consider exploitative, whether it's the gotcha or loot boxes or,
Absolutely. Yes. Right. Absolutely. And when you're dealing with the artist types in particular, they have to understand, if they're raising money, that the investors are looking for return on investment. And that means at some level, you're probably going to have to compromise your vision, right? There are companies, like a non-gaming example, one of the biggest ones would be WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp built this amazing product. They did not want to compromise. They did not want to over-monetize. They had a very simple approach. They got bought by Facebook for $19 billion, but the founders left Facebook as Facebook has tried to push monetization there, among other things. But that's highly unusual, right? Obviously. But a lot of these gaming studios, they have to understand that there has to be some compromise. There has to be some way to monetize users for this ultimately to be a sustainable pursuit and a commercially successful kind of endeavor.
Real quick, while we're on this subject, what are your thoughts on, kind of the current state and future of free-to-play games?
Sorry, what was that last part?
Of that approach, free-to-play.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at the end, I think at the end of the day, it's sort of like what people have said about Facebook for a few years, right? When something's free, and you don't know what they're selling, right? You're the product they're selling, right? But at the end of the day, none of these things are nonprofits, right? So there's always there's always got to be monetization. Something's always being sold, whether it's your time, it's data, whatever. I love free to play games, right? I love something like League of Legends, right? Where they've worked it out. I mean, you can play as much or as little as you want for free. But they manage to monetize incredibly well by buying, basically skins or things that you can use to customize the look of your game without altering the gameplay. I'm a big fan of that. I think that's a model that works, really well. But whatever, so in short, I'm a fan of free to play. I think it's here for the long run. I think that whatever it is, though, as a game designer and as an investor, you have to understand what that is up front, right? Because the games have to be designed from the ground up with that kind of a monetization model in mind. It's sort of hard, if not impossible, to tack that on, after the fact. I think there's obviously a very interesting battle happening right now between Apple and Fortnite. Right. So that's sort of fascinating because, going back to the idea of being an investor in gaming, one thing you have to understand is that gaming is hundreds of games a day are created and submitted to the app stores in mobile gaming. And a smaller number, but still a big number, are going up on Steam and places like that, other channels for desktop and non-mobile games. So there are a lot of games being created every day in the market, hundreds, if not more. So it is hyper competitive market. And yeah, there is an interesting battle, right, on this front, with the app stores taking the share that they take on revenues, and having the control that they have over really, it's sort of a monopoly, in that market. So that's an interesting battle, and it'll be interesting to see what Fortnite is one of the few companies that is in a position to take Apple on, and we'll see how that plays out.
Gotcha. And we'll be starting the Q&A session here shortly. So I just have a couple real quick questions before we transition to that. But on the flip side, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but from the perspective of founder building in the space, whether it's an actual video game they're developing or some platform or software that is used by the community, what does it take to stand out high level?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing for and you're talking about just for entrepreneurs that are looking to raise money. Yeah, one thing that I think is critical for so one thing we touched on, right, which is don't try and raise too soon. Raising money is a very time-consuming process. It's not necessarily an easy process, and you're not doing it in a vacuum, right? So people always sort of say, like, what numbers do I need to get you to invest? And the reality is, like, depending on the investor, whether it's a venture capital firm or an angel investor like me, there's only so many deals that I'm going to do in a year. And so it's not what numbers you hit. It's what are the best. Let's say I'm going to do 5 deals a year, right? I'm going to invest in the 5 best companies that I see. So I could give you numbers to hit, but if there's 5 companies that are doing better than you, I'm going to say, hey, congrats and good on you for hitting those numbers. You're on the right path. But I'm going to invest in 5 companies that are, frankly, doing better than you. They have bigger numbers. That said, I mean, I think to stand out, right, I think that for me, the number one thing I like in a founder is obsession, right? I want somebody that is obsessed with what they are doing. And that can come across in a lot of ways, but I think you need to be obsessed to be successful early on as an entrepreneur. It is so competitive. You're competing on a global scale, right? You're not competing with companies in Austin or in Texas. You're competing with every company in the world because they all have access to these same platforms. And they can all, for the most part, access, not all of the same investors, but and so I think when I sit down with founders and I start asking questions, you can sort of tell the ones that are obsessed because they have thought. They might not have all the answers, and that's totally fine, but they've thought deeply about these questions and problems. Versus somebody, you sit down and you start asking some pretty basic questions, and you can see they haven't really thought about those things, right? They don't understand what metrics are important to be looking at. They don't understand who their target demo is yet. They can't clearly articulate the problem they're trying to solve. And so, so I would say to stand out, you really want to show up having, like, this is something you should be thinking about, that, you know, before you go to bed and right before you wake up, and that will be reflected in your passion and your thinking. So that's one thing. Obviously, you know, the more relevant experience you have, right? This is sort of, I guess, you know, starting companies and this whole thing, it's not fair, right? So we can all pretend that it's trying to be fair, but it's not fair, right? And by not fair, it can be work-life balance. It can be the opportunities that you have based on your background, based on the connections you have, right? And so when you talk about standing out, right, there's no question that you're going to stand out if you list that you have gone to great colleges, if you have done amazing things in your life, if you have worked at great companies, right? So if I look at your profile and you're like, yeah, I was head of gaming at Google for 5 years. You know, I did my master's, in business at Harvard. I did my undergraduate at MIT, you know, and on and on and on. Like, yeah, you're going to stand out. Now, that's not me, right? And that's not most of us. So, but you do want to demonstrate that you are sort of you do want to demonstrate whatever you've done that you think makes you sort of exceptional and special is important. That might be where you went to school, it might be what you worked on, it might be other projects, it might be other accomplishments in life. But the more you can sort of make me believe that, because it's one thing to say, hey, I have a great idea, I'm raising money, I want to cure breast cancer. Okay, that's a great problem to solve, super important, big market. But why do I believe that you can solve that problem, right? So it's easy to say, I want to build awesome games, but I have to believe that you can and your team can execute against that. So to stand out, you want to demonstrate in every way that you can that you're sort of exceptional, right? And you know, that frankly, that can be hard. You know, that can be hard because a lot of us, again, myself included, I didn't go to an amazing school. I wasn't a particularly exceptional person. By the way, I also, as I said at the beginning, was completely unsuccessful at raising money in my first company, right? So it was frustrating. It wasn't fun. You could say it wasn't fair. But the way that I stood out the second time around when General Catalyst and Softbank wanted to invest is, oh, these two guys built a company with no funding and sold it to a pretty significant company, multinational. That was sort of our exceptional thing, right? And then went on and had this sort of other insight and was executing successfully against that, right? Which is sort of the third thing, which is just execution, right? So don't come and sort of tell me like how great you are and how great your ideas are. Like, show me the product, right? If I play with the product and I'm like, wow, this is kind of magic, right? You'll feel it, right? I mean, the first time somebody pops open Twitter, Snapchat, Foursquare, Facebook, I mean, again, we're talking Hall of Famers here, right? But you open it up and you're like, yeah, these guys are onto something, right? So, so yeah, execution.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And also knowing who you're talking to, right? It's sort of an ego thing, right? It's flattery, but like, it's definitely the wrong thing to sit down with investors and then be like, oh, well, I don't really know a lot about you. Tell me about you. And you're like, okay, that's kind of a strange way to start off a conversation about you asking me for, money.
Yeah. So real quick before we shift into Q&A, one last question.
Yep.
So the next 10 years might be witness to some incredible developments in the world of gaming, whether it's truly immersive and affordable AR, VR, cloud-powered, persistent virtual worlds, the gamification of the real world, or the rise of the so-called metaverse. What are you personally most excited about?
Well, so in the near term, right, we're seeing that, which is that you're getting, mobile phones, especially when I started, but have progressively gone from super casual games to harder and harder core games. That's awesome for a whole bunch of reasons, but if you look at games like PUBG, for example, and how successful they are in mobile overseas, again, that sort of ties into the theme I was talking about of opening up the world of possibilities to second and third world markets, where you can't assume that everybody has a nice laptop sitting at home with Google Fiber running into their house. So I love that the power of mobile and those devices and 5G and the improved networks is going to be able to bring more and more powerful gaming to everybody, right? Android phones in particular, super affordable in every market. Again, you're just connecting the world. You're allowing them to tap into a whole set of economic opportunities out there that they previously couldn't tap into. So I think that is super powerful. The other one, which you mentioned, is VR, right? I think we're all sort of waiting, I'm excited for the day that I can put on a headset and sort of disappear into World of Warcraft or Call of Duty or Minecraft and spend hours playing there with friends without sort of getting a headache or nauseous or rift sickness in general. We've been waiting for that for a while. I think it's coming. I think, I think it'll happen, but it's probably still a ways out. But, we're lucky to have really Facebook trying to move that ball forward for us.
Awesome. All right, let's shift over to our audience Q&A. First question from Justin Denson, if we can pull that up.
Yeah.
What do you think of gaming and esports moving into the world of pop culture? Will more celebrities start streaming? Does NRG have any plans to capitalize on this hype with some of your A-list investors? And I left that out of your bio. My mistake, Justin.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with that. So yeah, I'm a co-owner of NRG, which is we could do a whole AMA just on that, but it's one of the larger. It's one of the top and largest esports organizations in North America. So we have teams, World Championship San Francisco Shock for Overwatch. We have one of the best Call of Duty and certainly the most popular Call of Duty team. A whole bunch of individual streamers and lots of other teams, Valorant, whatnot, for different games. We also have been, again, really lucky to have some really high-profile investors with us. Shaq is probably the best one in terms of Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, because he's not just a great name and a good investor, but he's a big kid at heart. And so he will come online and play games with our players. If we're recruiting players, he'll hop on calls and try and convince them to join the team. And we have other investors like J-Lo, A-Rod, who are involved and are helpful in those ways as well. I think, to your point, whether it's concerts, whether it's celebrities getting in on this, right? We hear from a fair number of people on a regular basis that want to get in on this, and they want to do sort of celebrity gaming opportunities with our players and teams. Can you just pull up that question if that's possible? All right. So thanks. So do we have plans to capitalize on it? It's not our main strategy, right? But it's something that we use sometimes for recruiting or for some marketing purposes. I definitely think gaming and esports is for sure moving into pop culture, right? You have teams that have partnered with and games that have partnered with major brands like Louis Vuitton, who's rolled out a line of clothing around League of Legends. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And yeah, you're going to see more and more celebrities streaming because they, they can take advantage of this as a way to monetize, right? They don't necessarily need to do films or do TV shows or whatever. They can hop online and manage their own career streaming games or streaming Q&As or whatever it is they want to do and monetize and control their brand themselves. Yeah.
Gotcha. Next question from Aditya Adipali.
Oh, the biggest.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're the biggest markets emerging. Well, I guess in terms of emerging, I think that yeah, some of these I think there's the moving casual gamers into mid and harder core games, I think is a big opportunity, right? So getting the people that are paying Candy Crush or Words with Friends, those are already big markets, but that monetize pretty well. But I think moving them along into harder games is a big opportunity. I think, like I said before, taking mobile or taking some of these games and putting them on mobile and bringing them to other markets is a big opportunity. There's a lot of activity now around like super casual, hyper casual games that there's a lot of companies out there that are just banging out these really simple throwaway games, which seem to be doing well. So I think I don't know that there's any one market that jumps out to me, but I think there continues to be a lot of opportunity sort of across the board in terms of the types of games that you can build and also who you can build them for in the markets that you're building for. I think there's a lot of opportunity almost everywhere.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that, Aditya. Next question from Mike Panoff.
What is product?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What is product market fit for game development, or is game investment atypical? I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what he means by atypical, or.
I think maybe what he might mean is, the things that a game
like on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like,
well, so it really depends, right? So at the earliest stage, when you're just talking to a team and an idea and a vision, right, there is no product market fit. You just have to love the team and buy into the vision and believe that that's sort of a viable opportunity. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, if you want to go really far out, would be like late stage investments in a company like Epic that might be raising money. Now they've already have Fortnite in the marketplace, right? So I think it's, and obviously Fortnite has amazing product market fit, right? I mean, it's, yeah. So I think there's just the whole spectrum there. I think in general, though, to his question, early stage game investments, there's not really product market fit, right? Because until, like I said earlier, until you roll out these products into the market, you're not really going to know whether they work or not. So there's not like traditional product market fit metrics in the early stages, right? In the later stages, when games are live and the studio sort of has found its niche and they're building more and more titles in that niche, then yeah, you can look at the metrics and see, how their games are doing, how they're monetizing, what kind of distribution they have, what kind of engagement they have around those titles, and hope and assume that those strategies will work for future titles. But at the earliest stage, there's no product market fit. You're betting on the team.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Mike. Next question from Natalia Kingshak, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I butchered it, my apologies.
Yeah.
What is your monetization model and what helped you to boost distribution at early stages? So obviously there's two companies you started. Maybe you can speak to the most recent, JNJ Mobile.
Yeah. Okay. So JNJ Mobile, monetization model is really twofold. One is advertising, right? So we work with ad networks and directly with brands to promote whatever it is they want to promote on the site. Sometimes those are just kind of traditional banner ads that, the ones we all love and hate that just take up space on your screen. Sometimes it's more integrated where there's mini games or they sponsor items within games, those types of things. But basically advertising. The other one is the free-to-play model, right? Where we have a number of games on the site that are free to play. But if you want to boost your health, if you want to accelerate the time to craft certain items, you're buying virtual currency to buy items that do that. And so that model is sort of really worked out today about roughly 50-50, but it changes over time. In terms of boosting distribution, that is a huge challenge and will continue to be a more and more difficult over time, as not only are there more titles out there, but if you look at the gaming charts, the top games tend to stay at the top of those charts because they have built machines that are probably almost like hedge fund level in terms of teams that are going out and they're doing customer acquisition. They know exactly who to buy, how much to pay. They have effectively infinite dollars to do that. So it's very hard to launch a game and say, oh, we're going to run some Google AdWords to generate buzz, right? That's super hard. What we did do, though, we tried a whole bunch of different things. We tried partnering with carriers, cell phone partners. cell phone companies. We had some success there that was actually very meaningful for us. So we were able to partner with some of the smaller MVNOs like Boost Mobile, Cricket Wireless, Metro PCS, and said, hey, what would it take if we could get you guys to pre-install MocoSpace on your handset type of thing? That was super helpful at the time, sort of an innovative approach to distribution. We would go and promote MocoSpace into other social platforms. That was helpful. You try and take whatever early users you have on the platform and turn them into your biggest advocates and ambassadors. And again, we could talk about a lot of ways that you do that. But yeah, you have to be creative and try different things, because the idea, especially for most early stage companies that have little to no funding, the idea that you're going to roll out a game and you're going to make it a hit or viable by buying some ads or marketing on Google or the App Store, probably not going to happen for you. The best way to grow your product is to just build an amazing product that people want to tell their friends about.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Tret. Do you see a future for more of a blend between gaming and fitness? Example, gamifying a Peloton?
Okay, well, yeah. Now you're right in my sweet spot, right? So yes, I'm as a hobby, I'm into endurance sports, right? So triathlon, running, biking, swimming, and stuff like that. There is a lot. So yes, there is a lot of that. It's been going on for a while, but it's really taken off, especially during COVID, right? So obviously Peloton has exploded during COVID. There's another platform called Zwift, which is gamified cycling, mostly for hardcore cyclists, right? Peloton is more like spin class type of thing. Zwift is more for hardcore cyclists that, might ride, 100 miles more, in a ride. I mean, not all the rides are like that, but it's very, it's for cyclists. That business has exploded. You're seeing that with companies like Ergata that are doing rowing machines along those lines. So yeah, I think that is a huge market. It will be interesting to see when COVID ends, how many people stick with their Peloton versus go back to the gym versus do both, right? I'm sort of the camp that more people are gonna want to go back to the gym. And I think Pelotons may sort of become less popular, but I'm wrong I'm wrong much more often than I'm right. So I'm probably wrong about this, but I'll still say that's my take.
Awesome. All right. We have one last question, also from Adipali.
Okay.
How do you see supporting apps like Discord or Battlefy working in the gaming space?
Yeah, so great question. There's a lot of stuff happening in that world as well. And I think that those are huge enablers, right? The biggest enabler has been Twitch, right? So Twitch TV has revolutionized esports and gaming by creating, a channel for live streaming those games. I think Discord has played a massive role in enabling people to be social while gaming. And I think you'll see more and more innovation, in those areas. But yeah, those are huge, because ultimately for any, it's one thing to talk about an individual product, right? But even when you look at individual discrete products as huge successes, if you really look closely, they're sitting on top of an ecosystem. And so when you look at something like Facebook, right? Facebook wouldn't have worked 20 years ago because you needed the infrastructure, you needed the technology, you needed people to be able to have high-speed internet to connect to those types of things. You needed the technology to allow for the scaling of a product like that, right? And so just like these companion apps or supporting apps, they're all enabling sort of games like Fortnite to be as big as they are, because Fortnite can sit on the back of some of these technologies.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin. I feel like we've only begun to scratch the surface of everything and anything within the world of gaming, but we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to, hang out with us and talk and let us learn a little bit more about what's going on in the space, especially from those that may not be as risk deep in investing or working with companies in the gaming industry. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, and really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to reach out directly, they're welcome to email me or reach out to you, and you can connect them to me however whatever's easiest. But welcome. I'm always, I've been very lucky over my career, right, to benefit from the kindness of a lot of people that have helped me along the way over the years, and so. I love to be able to pay it forward in that way. And so if there's any way that I can help anyone or, along on their journey to success, I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. Now, is your email the best way to reach you at?
Yeah. moconinja@gmail.com. MOCONINJA. I don't know if you can pop it up there.
Yeah, let's have someone drop it in the chat. But Justin, This was awesome. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming out. I think that, that's about it on our end. One thing I did want to throw out to the audience, we do have the Big Idea competition with UTD coming up this Thursday. I think we're going to be dropping the link to the Eventbrite in the comments. So be sure to sign up for that. This has been great. Thank you so much for, coming out. I know, it's a Tuesday. There's a lot of stuff going on with Texas Startup Roadshow and Global Entrepreneurship Week, a lot of things competing for your time. But I'm really glad you came out and showed up for the Intro to Gaming and AMA.
All right, I'm honored to be here. So.
Hell yeah. All right. Take it easy, y'all.